why, James, are the American taxpayers sending money to Australian universities? So one of the things that Doge has come out, they did this brilliant thing. They sent a letter to all these. Tell us about it. They sent a letter to all these universities.
So basically, you know, and suddenly it's all become like, oh my God, the United States is interfering with our research here, and you know, they've said, well, apparently America is giving research grants to Australian universities. Okay, fine, maybe it's for some important work, maybe it's for who knows what. But they sent these questionnaires and they said, well, you know, what are your university's policies on two genders, on DEI, and all of these sorts of things? Pretty reasonable stuff. And, you know, this has become this whole huge freak out that, oh, America is interfering with our independence by threatening to take away money that they're giving us. So I don't even understand how that works. But the crazy thing is, the great thing is actually about what Donald Trump has done to universities in America right now is phenomenal.
Brilliant.
And this is, he is taking an absolute fire hose through these institutions that have been allowed to become these entirely politicized institutions. Columbia has now come to the table and said, all right, we're going to do a deal because our funding is at stake. I think his next move is going to be starting to move against the accreditation of a lot of universities that aren't going along with things like, you know, not using racial discrimination in their hiring and in their admissions policies, which is a huge issue in America. So this is the sort of thing that we need to be doing, because we'll talk about it later in the show. But, you know, we see at Macquarie University what's been going on there with all the welcome to country nonsense. So, yeah, we need to do this to the universities here in Australia.
We need it, and we know the left's march through the institutions started in academia. It has now spread like a cancer throughout all of society. It's in private institutions and in every facet of life. And Donald Trump, unlike 99% of conservative or right-wing leaders, whatever you want to call, is actually using power and tackling the cancer at its root. And if you want to change all the stuff that everyone complains about incessantly, how do we get here? How do we have like 500 genders? Why do we have this in our schools? Why are we so destructive and degenerate? Well, you actually need to support policies like this. And it's not always pretty. It's going to have an enormous amount of resistance. The left, who've just had their own way, whether the coalition or Labor are in charge, are going to arc up and they're going to have a mass tantrum, and you've just got to withstand it. US is doing that. They all withstand the tantrum, but I don't think our politicians have the guts or the backbone.
Well, the trouble is we are at a fork in the road, James, and over the next 18 months to 2 years, America's going to surge ahead. There's no question of that. It's going to surge ahead, and Australia's going to be left behind. Certainly left way, way behind if Albanese and co stay in power. But even if the coalition get into power, and which I hope they will, but carry on with this kind of, we're not quite sure, we're going to be a bit Labourish. No. The coalition have to get in. They have to cut hard. They have to cut the bureaucracy hard. There's so many things they need to do, particularly getting rid of red and green and black tape. This country's worried about welcome to country ceremonies when we're not focusing on the real issues, which is how to get this economy thriving, which we can do.
But the key thing here then is for Peter Dutton and the entire coalition team to go out with a united message about cost of living and everything that goes with it.
And opposing Labor.
And no front bench shadow minister should be getting up, no backbencher, and not the opposition leader should be getting up without just repeating simple, key messages about how Labor has made the cost of living worse at every turn.
They need 3-4 key messages. That's all. And
just keep
part
saying
of that needs to be what the so-called culture wars, because that's where they are on solid ground. The media will again have a mass tantrum, and as will the activists and academics, but the overwhelming majority of Australians are on the same page when it comes to this lunacy. They want a choice. They want someone who resists it. And thus far, we haven't had that. So if the coalition...
So this is the thing. So like the thing that Trump has done really, really well, and like it's almost his superpower, right? He can figure out what the 80-20 issues are. You know, like 80% of people agree with this, 20% don't. And he picks them and then forces all of the left to go defend that 20% there. So we see this time again. We see this, first of all, you know, with, of course, transgender sports and all of that. You know, we see this now. Trump's like, hey, I'm deporting Venezuelan narco gangbangers. And people are like, yeah, good. We don't want them in our cities. We don't want them in their towns. But then the left has to go, No, the Venezuelan gangbangers, they have rights and they need a judge to keep them in the country even though they're here illegally. And everybody looks at the left like, what are you on about? So this is the thing. So Dutton needs to find, the coalition has to find the equivalent 80-20 issues here. Force Albanese and Labour to defend their madness.
Unfortunately, James, they've had all of those, and had they been watching this show for the last 18 months, we've given them every one of those. Transgenderism, women and men in women's sports, all of these issues, particularly the waste of money on Indigenous issues. Now, the coalition have been great on that. They've stepped up and said we'll only have one flag and we're going to tone down the welcome to country ceremonies. But there's so much more they could be doing. I want to see Jacinta Price out there every single day doing what they've done, what Elon Musk has done in America, and said, look at the waste. We've shown it on this show. It's there. The figures are there. The millions and millions of dollars are wasted on big bureaucracies in Canberra where they sit around, spending money on supposedly closing the gap and doing nothing of the sort. There are so many issues. Obviously net zero, obviously the culture wars on transgender and so on are issues that the coalition should be right up in front and centre, and instead they're kind of holding back, Rita. And
They're refusing to lean into things where they've got the overwhelming majority of voters behind them, including majority of Labor voters. And that's what I don't understand, because those promises don't actually cost money. If you say, we're going to install meritocracy at universities. We're not going to have all these DEI-style programs because it undermines what we're doing in academia. That doesn't actually cost money. Saying that we're going to get rid of all the acknowledgement, welcome of countries and all this messaging that somehow we're not a legitimate country, that we're visitors on our own land, it doesn't cost any money. And it sells values, and people care about values. Even in a cost of living crisis, people care about the values of the country.
It's values that motivate people.